Given that HPV is a common STI, you would think that most people would know some basic information about it, either from their doctor or their own curiosity. To see what college students knew about HPV, I interviewed a couple of them.
What HPV is?
Is human papillomavirus, something close to that.
Tiff, do you know what HPV is?
Vaguely.
What is it?
Human papillovirus?
Do you know what HPV is?
Yeah.
What is
It's
it?
a virus. HPV stands for human papillomavirus.
Do you know how it's transmitted?
Sex.
Do you know how it's transmitted?
Like, through sexual fluids.
Do you know how it's transmitted?
Through contact, I believe.
How do you think it's transmitted?
Sexually?
When you think of HPV, what do you think of?
I think of the vaccine for it. And the fact that the vaccine is or not distributed, but you get the vaccine later in life compared to other vaccines that you get in infancy.
When you think of HPV, what do you think of?
An STD.
What do you think HPV causes?
Cervical cancer.
What do you think HPV causes?
Cervical cancer, testicular cancer, lots of cancer.
What do you think HPV causes?
I think it's, in some cases it can be like symptom free, I think, but it can also cause like some sorts of cancer. Like I think it's linked to like cervical cancer. And I think, just say bad things.
Did you get the HPV vaccine?
I did.
How old were you when you got it?
Pretty young, probably middle school.
Did you get the HPV vaccine?
I did, and I was shook.
How old were you when you got it?
21, 22.
I also sent out a quick survey for students to fill out asking what HPV is, how it's transmitted, what does it cause, and if they got vaccinated. Most people knew that HPV stood for human papillomavirus, thought it was transmitted by sex, and what they thought it caused varied. Most people who filled out the form were vaccinated, but there were a range of responses on how medical professionals approach the subject. Based on these polls, it seemed like most people know what HPV stands for. For the most part, people knew limited information about what HPV is, how it's transmitted, or what it causes. You might be wondering, what exactly do I need to know? Here's what you should know. HPV is a double-stranded circular non-enveloped dsDNA virus belonging to the Papillomavirinae family. It's specific to humans since papillomaviruses can only infect certain host species due to coevolution of host and virus. However, within HPV, there are more than 150 different serotypes that are further broken down into low-risk and high-risk types. Low-risk types are non-oncogenic but tend to cause abnormal tissue growth in the form of benign warts and minor cell changes. High-risk types are oncogenic, causing abnormal cells to form precancerous lesions and eventually cancer if left undiagnosed. The HPV virion is made up of a capsid and a viral genome. The viral genome is made up of 6 early genes E1, 2, 4, 5, 6, and 7, 2 late genes L1 and L2, and a regulatory region. Early genes deal with gene expression, replication, and cell cycle. Late genes deal with virion assembly and capsid formation. The virion enters the epithelium through traumatic injury to the tissue or microlesions. After the virion enters the epithelium, it infects the basal epithelial cells and replicates at a low level in the host nucleus. It's important to remember that here the HPV viral DNA isn't integrated into the host genome, but the viral DNA is present and replicating inside the nucleus of the host cell. As the infected basal epithelial cell replicates, the viral genome then exists in the daughter cell's nucleus and is pushed up through the epithelium as more infected daughter cells are created underneath. Once the epithelial cell sloughs off, L1 and L2 are expressed, creating a capsid. At this point, HPV virions are released at the tissue surface, making it possible to infect others. Problems arise when HPV viral DNA is linearized and integrated into the host genome. To linearize the circular HPV genome, a cut is made in the E2 gene, destroying the gene. The E2 gene regulates the transcription of E6 and E7, so when E2 is destroyed, E6 and E7 are able to inactivate tumor suppressor proteins P53 and PRB. Without P53 and PRB, cells with damaged DNA are allowed to replicate and lead to cancer precursors in cancer. Most commonly, HPV infection is asymptomatic, and 90% of the time the body naturally clears the infection within 2 years. If your body doesn't clear the infection, it progresses to abnormal tissue growth. This progression can happen between 1 and 20 plus years after the initial infection. When the viral DNA is still episomal, abnormal tissue growth is non-oncogenic and typically presents as warts. When the viral DNA becomes integrated into the host cell genome, abnormal tissue growth is oncogenic, presenting as precancerous lesions and can progress to invasive cancer if left unchecked. HPV-related cancer isn't limited to cervical cancer. HPV can also cause anal, penile, and oropharyngeal cancers. How HPV infection progresses depends on if viral DNA is integrated and the HPV serotype the person's infected with. Serotypes 6 and 11 most commonly cause warts, but 16 and 18 have a high risk of progressing to invasive cancer. Even though there's a 90% clearance rate for HPV, you should still be concerned about being infected. While HPV infection may not directly affect you, you have the potential to transmit it to others. There's no way of knowing serotype of HPV for anal, penile, and oropharyngeal cancers, but there is DNA testing available for Pap testing in people over 30. There's cervical cancer screening with the Pap test and HPV DNA test. However, there's no approved screening methods for anal, penile, or oropharyngeal cancers. There's no cross protection for the different strains, so having an infection by one strain does not prevent you from being infected by another strain either at the same time or later down the road. There's no treatment for HPV itself, there's only treatment for what HPV infection progresses to. It's pretty likely that you'll be infected with HPV at some point in your lifetime, given that HPV is the most common STI in the US. Anyone can be infected by and transmit HPV. Genital HPV is most commonly spread by vaginal and anal contact, but transmission from oral sex can occur. There have also been cases of HPV-positive mothers infecting their newborns during childbirth. While this doesn't happen often, it does happen. There have also been cases of people infected with HPV who have never had sex before. There are a couple of different ways you can reduce your risk of infection. If you're able to get screened with Pap testing or HPV DNA testing, do it. By getting screened, it's more likely that you can get treatment before infection progresses to invasive cancer. If you're having sex, use a male or a female condom. Condoms reduce skin-to-skin contact, but you're still at risk for infection as there's still skin-to-skin contact. Reducing the number of sexual partners you have can reduce your risk, but because HPV isn't usually detected until warts or lesions are present, there's still a chance that you can infect your partners with HPV unknowingly. The best way to protect yourself is to get vaccinated. While the vaccines currently on the market don't protect against all strains of HPV, they protect against the strains known to commonly cause genital warts and cancer. Currently, there are 2 brands and 3 products on the market that provide protection against HPV. The Cervarix and Gardasil vaccines protect against HPV 16 and 18, which cause over 60% of all HPV-related cancers in the US. Cervarix vaccine is only bivalent. Gardasil has a tetravalent vaccine and a nonavalent vaccine. Gardasil's vaccine covers HPV 16, 18, 6, and 11, and the nonavalent vaccine additionally protects against 5 other oncogenic strains. HPV vaccines are typically given at age 11 or 12, with catch-up doses given through age 21 for males and 26 for females. For men who have sex with men and transgender persons, doses can be given through age 26. The vaccines available are meant as preventive measures and should be administered before the person becomes sexually active, as they don't clear current HPV infections. HPV tends to be thought of as an STI and is commonly associated with cervical cancer in the public's mind. However, most people don't know how common HPV really is and how often they have potential to be infected by it. When I told people statistics like, by the age of 50, 80% of women will have had an HPV infection in their lifetime, or 14 million new infections occur yearly in the US, or even 30% of oral cancers are related to HPV, most people were surprised by this. Increasing public knowledge of HPV and increasing vaccine adherence can help reduce the number of cases of HPV infection as well as the number of cases of progressed HPV.